Hi, my name is Gianna Michalis, and welcome to Bridging the Sound with my Larry the Lobster, or as promoted, my crustacean. Um, but in this podcast that may or may not be a continuing series, and at the moment is simply starting as a school project, um, Bridging the Sound is going to be talking about the different things that happen in music therapy and how we can better advocate for our clients, for ourselves, for anything that just helps us be more knowledgeable and to become better assets and better tools for our clients in the future. Um, in this episode specifically, we are going to be getting into language barriers in music therapy and how that can affect therapeutic relationships and the effectiveness this has towards our non-English speaking clients. I do want to preface by saying that in this episode specifically, due to my own personal experience and just simply the research that I was doing after being inspired to talk about this topic, I'm going to be referring to Hispanic, Latinx, Latino clients. Again, just due to a personal experience and just based on the research that I was simply doing by myself. And I do understand that non-English speaking clients, it can go for anyone outside of the Hispanic, Latino culture. So again, I just do want to preface that. But for the sake of this episode, I will only be referring to Hispanic clients. But please feel free to try and relate. And depending on where I post this, definitely comment on any personal experiences you've had with clients who are non-English speaking, or even from the student perspective, and how you were trying to handle that and how that went for you. So, yeah, with that being said, let's get into the nitty-gritty of it all. So, going into this podcast episode series, I had no intention of interviewing anyone. I was simply going to go based off the research that I had briefly done and kind of dive more into it, talk about it a little more into detail and things like that. But with SWAMTA, or to plainly put it, the music therapy conference that took place in my hometown of Houston this year, I took the opportunity to interview two amazing souls that were willing to let me bombard them last minute with this idea. The first one being Veronica Tierra. Her and I believe her fiance did a presentation on how us as music therapists, aspiring music therapists, can be a better tool, be a better asset towards our Hispanic Latinx clients. And it was such a beautiful presentation. I could not have said it better myself, with emphasizing to ask questions and even learning the simplest phrases and how we can check in with everyone, and things like that. So it was really, really amazing. She was super, super sweet to offer some of her opinions on the language barriers in music therapy and how we can tackle that. So we'll get into that in the second part of this episode. But the other person that I also interviewed was Angelica Zavala. She is a student at Texas Women's University, I believe, who is obtaining her master's degree. So, period. We love that. She was so kind enough to answer all of my questions. She gave me written responses. So if you see me and if you're watching this video, and I'm like looking down, it's because I have my iPad and I also have like my note cards and stuff. So yeah. But yeah, with that being said, the first question is, can music truly function as a universal language, or is that an oversimplification? Now, Angelica agrees. Oh, before I continue, I'm also not going to be quoting directly from them. I'm probably going to be giving summaries and things like that, just because the responses are pretty long from both ends. But she agrees that yes, music being a universal language, quote unquote, is an oversimplification. She goes on to talk about how people have different lived experiences with music, and sometimes it can be dangerous to provide certain statements or assumptions, because when we assume, what does that make of us? Um, and I very much agree to that. We are taught in our studies, at least with my program specifically, that everyone has a different lived experience with almost everything and anything. So my experience with music is definitely going to be different from the person who's sitting next to me. I grew up performing, singing all the time. The person next to me may just simply listen to music, and just certain genres are what trigger certain things. Um, yeah, so it's music is complex. I feel like, especially if you study music, music can be very, very complex. And so I struggled a lot with trying to understand the statement of music being this universal language. It is what bridges us and connects us to the person standing right in front of us. That was also no pun intended, by the way. But the more the more I think about it, the more I talk about language barriers and language barriers, period. This can apply outside of music therapy. Um, because I've seen it going through middle school, going through elementary, going through high school. Um, there was always a language barrier somewhere. And again, going back to like Hispanic and Latino culture, a lot of my friends spoke Spanish. A lot of who I interacted with spoke only Spanish and struggled with their English. So, yeah. But to continue on the topic of music being a universal language, like I said, I struggled, and I continue to struggle, because who says that we can communicate through music and we are able to understand each other? Emotionally, yes. If we really, really analyze the lyrics and what we are trying to convey to the other person, maybe. But to say it's a universal language, I really don't know. I can't say yes and I can't say no, because how far can the music really take us before it begins to communicate nothing? How far can we sit here and sit next to someone who doesn't speak English, and all we're doing is playing songs back and forth and trying to have a conversation all on top of that? Of course, not literally. I don't, but those are the things that happen in my head when I hear that statement. And sometimes I'm like, well, maybe it is. Maybe it is a universal language. Um, to talk about my experience, I had a practicum, and he was my second client. Then I was my second and my only client that I was going to be working with, given that the first one had, so like it was another situation. But we were talking, and my supervisor speaks very little Spanish. Definitely tried, but speaks very little. So in this practicum, I'm like, okay, I'm Hispanic, I'm Mexican, I speak, read, write fluently in Spanish. Those were all my subjects growing up in elementary. Why am I so nervous to take on this client? Why do I feel like I am going to struggle? I can communicate. I can do everything in my power to try and, implement certain experientials and see if my session plans worked well or whether if they didn't. And then going beyond the nervousness, it felt like, okay, well, now that like I've processed, right, that I have a Hispanic client, how am I going to have my supervision meetings? when my supervisor barely understood what was even happening. And what helped me a lot too was that the SLP was also a Hispanic. And they were also kind of going back and forth because it was a co-leading session at this point. But yeah, I don't know. It struck a weird feeling for me because it felt like I was by myself trying to go through everything. And my supervisor giving me very limited advice because they couldn't really understand or fully grasp what was taking place because of the language barrier. It just, as a student, I felt proud of myself because I was able to tackle the, the observation, the practicum, right? But trying to look at it from the outside in, it was like, well, this feels very unethical. Because what if I didn't speak Spanish? What if the level of communication that I needed in order for me to get through the session wasn't all the way there? Would this client still have been taken on by a music therapist? Would it have where would these sessions have gone to? Who would they have gone to? I might be going on a little bit of a tangent here, but yeah. So it was definitely something that sparked the idea for me to want to talk about this topic in specific. So, but yeah. But going back to Angelica's responses, she believes that music is a powerful thing, a powerful being, and does have the potential to connect everyone. And like I said, I believe that it does too. I truly believe that music can connect us to one another and kind of deepen our relationship to an extent with each other, um, and that we are able to communicate so many things at a time when it comes down to music. Um, she also goes on to say that um, music can connect us to people when it's done intentionally and when it is within the context of people's experiences that are being considered. And I highly agree with that. Again, people have different lived experiences, and the access to music may have been completely different. And um, we just don't know. We don't know what their relationship with music is, and that is also always the number one question that we should be asking: is what is the relationship with music that they have, and will they truly benefit from the uses of music therapy? So, yeah. So, for the second question, should therapists learn key phrases in a client's language or rely on interpreters? Angelica says, I think therapists should try to learn and make the effort to learn about a client's culture and language. I know I said I wouldn't be quoting directly, but I felt like that was really important. And I, again, 100% agree. I recognize there is some slight bias with, again, the experience that I had and simply just wanting to advocate more, I guess, for my clients and any client period who is non-English speaking or where English isn't their first language. But this kind of also goes into what Veronica and her fiance's presentation was about. Should therapists, music therapists, learn certain key phrases in their client's language? Well, for one, during the assessment process, you learned that they were non-English speaking. And probably even before that, before even going through with the assessment, I'm sure you also knew that this person or persons are non-English speaking. And if you still decided to take them on because you felt that they could benefit, that you can help them, then not to throw the assumption word out, but I would assume people would try and at least learn again, hi, how are you in Spanish? Hola, me llamo You say your name, ¿cómo estás? ¿Qué vamos a hacer hoy? Things like that. And that way it's still creating somewhat of a relationship. It's still creating a trusting relationship, because if you're simply just going in there and saying, hi, how are you? And then you're playing whatever, and the client has no clue on what to say, no clue on what to ask, on how to even go about it. Are they really benefiting from music therapy? Are we really doing our best to make sure that the client is, for one, comfortable, two, is understanding what is taking place in the session, instead of just making it this receptive experience and hoping for some sort of emotional reaction, physical reaction? Because again, experiences are different, lived experiences are different, and um, the music. Some people may not like mariachi music. Some people may not like banda music. It really just depends. And if you're going in there playing a Vicente song because you heard Vicente Fernandez is like the George Strait to Mexico, and your client is like, absolutely not, I have the worst memories associated with listening to this man's music. Well, did you ask? Did you just assume that that's what they like to listen to? So, yeah. Angelica also goes on to say that we also have to consider the environment the therapist is in and their access to time. And yes, that is very true. I recognize that even specifically down to hospital settings where you may only get 2 to 3 sessions with your client and before they get discharged, um, it's difficult. It would be hard. And even then, 2 to 3 sessions is probably me being generous. I don't know. But it still doesn't hurt. And um, I feel like you get a better sense of connection when you are able to simply talk. Because although, yes, we are called music therapists and we use music to try and cultivate different um, experientials and different session plans and different treatment plans and how we can go about it to help our clients um, improve or decrease or increase what they are needing. Um, Talking is something that simply a person wants to do, and also be able to just enjoy the music all on top of that. I feel like I'm just rambling now, but um, I understand it's hard. I understand it's hard that, again, being in a hospital setting, if you are in a hospital setting, that the kid you're talking to only speaks Spanish and their parents only speak Spanish, and you're trying to communicate so much, and you're taking the time to try and learn something, and then you don't see them anymore. Um, the fact that you even put that much effort in, although no one's going to see it, no one's going to be able to recognize it, for the next client that you take on, it's going to pay off, and they're going to appreciate it, and you're going to see the look of relief, like, thank God that I'm going to be able to try and communicate to this person. I'm going to be able to try and have a conversation. Is it going to be mucho? And by mucho, I mean it's going to sound a little broken, but you're trying. You're trying and you're communicating, and that's what Hispanic and Latin culture does. Like, we appreciate it. We appreciate the effort, even if, like I said, it's a little broken. It's a little mochito here and there, but it's great. And again, if you don't know if you said it right, just ask your client, be curious, sit there, and if you really wanted to connect with your clients, what better way than to try and learn their language? I'm not saying go on and buy like a Rosetta Stone application. I don't know if that's showing my age a little bit, but you know, don't feel like you have to go on Duolingo. Don't feel like you have to go on Rosetta Stone, like I said, or Babbel, or any language translation website, just so that way you can try and learn the language in an X amount of time, and your client may at that point be discharged. At that point, your client may have been terminated from music therapy services. Just learning certain phrases, and you pick up, like, learning certain languages, and you're around that language all the time, you learn to pick up certain things, and then you come to understand, and you learn how to just put them in sentences. So yeah. And for our final question, does relying on music instead of language limit deeper cognitive processing? Angelica goes on to say that we don't know, and we might not ever know. Assuming that we are, again, bringing in the language aspect and how that limits a lot of different things. It just might. Because again, relying on music instead of language, how far can we really get? How far can we really sit there and use music to try and have a conversation when we still need that human interaction? We still need to be able to say, like, hey, this is how I felt in this part of the song. This is how I felt after we did this. This is how I felt after doing a receptive meditation experience. It can only go so far. And if you think the music is doing something and you're documenting that, again, how ethical are you being? How much of a tool are you really considering yourself to be before even trying to think about the client? Veronica goes on to say that we should try and be there for our clients more. We, again, to be a better tool, to be a better asset as music therapists. And for those working in the field, if you've come across this, in what way did you stop taking me, I can't out before genuinely trying to think of a way to better serve your client? In Veronica's presentation during SWAMTA, they had opened up, her and her fiance had opened up the panel for questions. And a lot of questions were, well, how can I do this? And how I just feel very scared. I feel that I couldn't do this. And Veronica says, I hear a lot of I and not enough of what can I do for the client? What can I do to better serve the client, instead of constantly saying and asking, well, I can't do this because I don't feel comfortable. I can only go so far. It's just I don't know how to X, Y, and Z. So I loved how they put it. And again, if you don't know, you ask. Be curious about it. Be resourceful. Ask questions. My culture and my people, we appreciate the effort. We love effort. We love the fact that if we're putting in 98% and you're giving us the 2%, and you're genuinely trying and you're asking, and again, you're being curious and you're trying to be resourceful, that's enough. That is enough. And going back to my personal experience, that's exactly what it was. Did I struggle? I went through a whole reflective process throughout that semester. And did I struggle? Yes. But when I would see my supervisor try and chime in on the conversations that we would have in the middle of, like, my plan for the session, I saw the effort. She was trying to communicate. My client appreciated the fact that she was trying to communicate. his wife, the SLP, was even like, okay, yeah, this is how we say this, and this is what we do. And, even in the limited time that we had for our supervision meetings, she would ask like, hey, like, is this how I'm saying it correctly? Or, this is the Spanish level that I have. And that was perfectly fine. So limiting the language portion of the session, I feel, in my opinion, does limit that cognitive processing, that emotional processing, everything. And why completely remove it? Why think that it's okay to simply rely on the music and not, again, human interaction? So yeah. And to end it with some final thoughts, language, again, is complicated. It's complex. Music is complicated and complex. When you are mixing two very complicated and complex things, it can be very difficult to navigate. And not just Hispanic and Latin clients, Latino clients, but for anyone whose language isn't English, their first language isn't English. It's hard. It's hard. But I can guarantee you that everywhere they're going to appreciate the fact that you're even trying to communicate. And all I want to say is that if we continue to take on clients whose English isn't their first language, and we see that they struggle, and we see that they're comfortable speaking in their native tongue, again, I'm not saying go off and learn the entire language in an X amount of time, because it'll be hard, it'll be stressful, you'll be frustrated with yourself, and at least I know I would be frustrated with myself, because I'm trying to hurry up and learn a language when I only have so much time with my client. Learning their key phrases. Again, hi, hello, how are you? What do you feel like doing today? Where are we trying to take this session? Certain key phrases that we have as music therapists, certain key phrases that they have as a human being, as a client, checking in with their family, especially. Veronica's fiance, and I feel so bad I didn't get his name, but he goes on to say that how we do, Hispanic and Latin clients do everything as a family. And it's true. I am extremely close with my family, and we do things together as much as we can. So if I'm going to the doctor, more than likely my mom, my dad, and my brother are going to be in the room. Of course, as a little kid, that happened. And so the doctor would turn around and check in with everyone. Hi, mom. Hi, dad. How are you doing? Hi, brother. How are you doing? And then, divert the attention to, okay, this is my client. Let's see what's going on with you. Are you sick? Are you feeling okay? What's going on? That is exactly what we should be doing in sessions. And don't get intimidated. Don't get intimidated at all. I feel like a lot of people think that speaking in a whole nother language is scary. And it can be. Again, it can be, because you don't know if you might miscommunicate something. But when you're doing it with a smile and they can see that you're nervous, more than likely they're going to be like, there's going to be some giggles. There's going to be like, oh my goodness, but they'll help you. My family would help you. I know I would help you if I was in that situation. But yeah, I really truly believe that us as aspiring music therapists who are working in the field actively at this moment, and people who are just curious and genuinely just want to know, I don't know what the fuck I was saying there. To end everything with some final thoughts, language is complex, music is complex. And when you're mixing two very complicated and complex things together, it can be frustrating, it can be hard, it can be scary, intimidating. But as aspiring music therapists, as music therapists who are actively working in the field, and for those who are just curious, let's be better. Let's continue to be curious. And if you're not already curious, get curious. Ask your questions and be resourceful. The effort is visible. We can see it as a Hispanic woman. I can definitely see the effort that someone puts in when they try and communicate and when they try and, for the sake of this episode specifically, speak Spanish. When you're telling me, hi, how are you? Hola, ¿cómo estás? And I hear that accent, I'm not going to judge you. I'm going to respond to you in Spanish. I recognize the effort, and if you want me to correct you, I will. And yeah, like, and I don't mean like correcting you in, when I said that statement, in like a rude way. I mean, like, like the next time you talk to someone, this is how you want to say it, or this is like a way you use this phrase in a sentence type of deal. But again, we see the effort. Everyone will see the effort and everyone will appreciate it. And even taking music therapy out of it, same thing. Same thing. When you're working in a restaurant, when you're working in an office setting, when you're working anywhere, or even when you just try and make a new friend, and you can hear them speaking in Spanish, and you can hear that that's probably their most comfortable language. Just communicate, just try. And don't feel that you have to learn an entire language in 3 months, because it's hard. But learning certain key phrases in music therapy and how we try and communicate with our clients, and learning certain key phrases that is still open-ended, still pretty easy to try and conversate with our clients and their family if they're in the session, is important. And again, be curious, get curious, ask questions, and be resourceful. Well, thank you so much for listening. I feel like I blabbered just a little bit and I could go on and on about this topic. But if you watched the whole thing, thank you. Thank you so much. I truly appreciate it. I had a lot of fun doing this project. And we'll see if this is a continuing series in the future. Because again, if it continues, it's music in general and the things that happened in the music industry and the music world. And again, continuing to advocate for music therapists, continuing to advocate for our clients, and just trying and push knowledge out there. So yeah, thank you so much for watching.